State your name. Can we get 15 minutes on the clock?
Yeah.
And please keep in mind the comments of Councilman Carlisle.
I got it.
We like brevity on this body.
I promise you I butchered my arguments.
All right, when he starts speaking, let the clock run.
J. DeWitt, 1870 Madison Avenue, 38104. I'm Chief Negotiator for the Crafts Association of Memphis. I want to say first, good evening, councilors, staff, and all the city workers who make these meetings happen. We appreciate you. I come before you today with some good news. We don't have an impasse here. We actually have a signed agreement. The Crafts Association represents 7 unions of the city of Memphis whose members all have special skills which classify them as craftspeople. In a moment, we're going to review this agreement, drafted and signed by a designated agent of the mayor. That agent and the union, represented by me as the chief negotiator of the Crafts Association, engaged in good faith bargaining with 6 meetings in the month of March, where we reached a fair and equitable agreement with the administration. We did that a day early on March 30th. By midnight of March 31st, the negotiation period was over. And I'm going to tell you that the city got a lot more than they bargained for. We had the most cooperation at the table between labor and management that anybody had ever seen that was on my negotiating committee. The goodwill was running high, and we had a lot going on. I'm afraid that all that changed 2 weeks later when the administration sent us a memo that rescinded their agreement and gave us no cause. I gave y'all a packet, sent a packet to y'all that have some documents in them. I'd like to review them with you now. Does everybody have those in front of them? I think that's the case from the city that you have.
I don't think we do, Miss.
No. It's in your binder, Don.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Has everybody got that in front of them? Okay. All right, y'all, the first thing that we have there is ground rules. We negotiate these, everybody does, every table before every time you go into a negotiation. I'd like to note that the last 2 sentences on the second page of rule number 6 provide that articles are binding when they're approved by a final decision maker, and that this approval shall be given prior to the negotiation deadline. The next line brings that into emphasis as to when that is. It gets down to the minute, and it's from our impasse ordinance, it's law. You'll notice on the last page that it's signed by the mayor's appointed agent and the chief negotiator for the administration at our table. Next document you'll see is the meat of the situation. It is a signed agreement. This is a signed agreement between the union and the administration. The first page has the wages that reflects our total economic package that you have before you that you're voting on. The pages that follow have some longevity increases and a raise for lead employees. The last page, as you'll see there, page 5 of this document is signed. It is signed by an agent of the mayor, an agent of the administration. He's an alternate chief negotiator for our table, and he's the division director of general services, where half of this bargaining unit is. This is the last correspondence that I got that day on March 31st. Barring some catastrophe, there's really no cause for this not to be our agreement moving forward. We finished early, 32 hours before our deadline. We struck a deal. And the next day, a few clerical errors were found in the wage article. And they were dates. They weren't anything big. They sent it to me, and we signed it again. This document's been signed twice before the deadline. Okay, that was done. The next document is the city's total economic package. If you take a look at it for me, it's on city letterhead. It's got a lot of red writing on it. 13 days passed since the negotiation session. The last negotiation session, the negotiating committee went back and told the 133 members of this bargaining unit that their employer had bargained in good faith and had struck a deal at the table for the first time that any of them had seen. The administration contradicts their own agent's signatures with this document, and they're substituting an offer that's backward moving. They have some costing analysis, and so do I. Both of them show that this deal on this piece of paper is worth less than what we had in March, and therefore it's in bad faith. I've heard arguments from them that it's a clarifying document, that it doesn't change anything, but I'd like to draw your attention to the last word of the second paragraph on that. It's underlined and it's in italics, and it says rescinded. This is a memo to rescind an offer. It's not a clarification. Also, the bonus has been moved to a side letter that I've never seen. I don't know that it's ever been drafted. The city's total economic package does not have longevity increases, and it does not have lead crew person increases. We'd eliminated a hazard article from most employees. It's back. But in the process of doing that, without getting in the weeds too much, they took a 1.5% off the top of every wastewater treatment plant employee that we have in our unit. The next document in there is the impasse ordinance itself. I don't want to get into it too much in the weeds. If y'all have questions, you can have them. But I think it shows in there in the definitions and in the pre-impasse procedure that this isn't in order. We aren't at an impasse because we have an agreement, a signed agreement. I've got some costing analysis there. The only thing I want to point out is that our deals aren't too far apart. I don't have access to compression data, so I have to just do what directly affects the people that I have data on. We're talking $20,000. The city committee said it's something like $300,000. That's a whole lot of difference. But relatively to the budget, it's not a whole lot. It's really not. And I say that for one reason. I say it because the mayor said it at his State of the City address. He said we're doing okay. We're not poor. We can afford this. It's fair and equitable. There's been some talk about being worried about valuing craftspeople over firefighters who got 3% this year instead of 5%. Sanitation workers don't make the same as firefighters who don't make the same as craftspeople. We decided everybody in their different rates when we set these job descriptions up. We don't need to divide them this way. And also, if it eases your mind any, I've spoken with representatives of the firefighters, ASME, operators, machinists, dispatchers, and police, and no one is opposed to this deal. 4%, 40%, doesn't matter. They all indicated to me that they can take care of their own business and they'd really rather not be part of this. It's also worth mentioning that according to the total rewards data on the City of Memphis website, fire has seen wage increases of 10% during Strickland's administration, whereas the crafts have only seen 4.5% in increases. So I promise you, none of the firefighters are feeling like they're victims of inequity towards us. So I'll close by saying this. We all know that moving backwards on labor negotiations are bad faith and that it's unethical. I'll say one final time that I think that our union feels that this argument that the city's been putting forth, that this ordinance gives them a right to rescind a negotiated signed agreement, is specious and that it misinterprets the ordinance. Although a lot of people feel differently than I do. If you feel that that right's granted by the ordinance, we still have the question as to why we would use that power here. We've never used it since this ordinance was in place since 2017. Why do it? Why back out? Is it right as an employer of 133 people to change the terms of the deal you made and signed? If you do it, shouldn't you give good cause? I'm asking you all to do the right thing today. A person's word and their handshake means something to these people. They're in high demand right now. West Tennessee and Arkansas craftspeople have so much work right now that we can't even fill it and there's no end in sight. I made an initial offer of 15% increase for this unit. I did not think I was going to get 15% increase for this unit. It was an initial offer, but I never make an offer that's not based on something. Kimberly-Clark, it's called KTG now, FedEx, DuPont are all paying 115% of the scale that the city's paying right now. This agreement at 4% barely brings them even with their peers in construction. These people want to serve their city, but the people who bring you light, heat and air, traffic signals, and operating first response radio system, lines on our streets, and working toilets in our municipal buildings, They need their administration, their employer, to keep their word. We have a fair and equitable agreement that we've signed and agreed to. Please don't let it slip away from these people. And that's all I got. Just 5 minutes to spare, sorry.
Councilman Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Is there any questions for Mr. DeWitt, or are we gonna, no questions? Okay, we'll hold the questions until the administration has an opportunity to present. Ms. Hyman, always good to see you. The floor is yours whenever you are ready. Are you speaking from there?
Yes.
All right. And our colleagues are so thrilled to see you present before the full council. Somewhat different on the other side. And before you actually get into your presentation, Ms. Hyman, you know the rules. Name and address for the record.
Absolutely. Am I ready for the clock? Comptrollers? Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Brooke Hyman. I'm at 125 North Main Suite 414 in the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Office. And our office handles the labor negotiations. So I'm going to jump right into it and go through our presentation and also address some of the concerns voiced by Mr. DeWitt. The city's position this year, and can we dim the light a little bit because it's hard to read? The city's position this year is that the Crafts request of 4% will create an inequity amongst our employees, including a greater amount than our police, fire, and emergency dispatchers. And the reason that that creates an inequity is that the rest of our employee associations and our general employees are receiving 2%. All non-represented are receiving 2%. ASME is receiving 2%. IMAW is receiving 2%. And IUOE is receiving 2%. And back in on December 15th of 2020, the City Council asked the City of Memphis administration and specifically the Human Resources Division to make public safety a priority when they passed the Public Safety Task Force recommendations, which included increased hiring, increased emphasis on needs and benefits for public safety employees to ensure that we attracted and retained good talent in those pivotal workforces, like many of our other employees. Council has also requested that we be fair and that we always present and maintain a balanced budget. And if we are not going to be fair, if there's going to be a difference, we have to have something to back that up. The 1.48 resignation rate of the Crafts Association does not compare to the 34% of fire recruits that resign, to the 28% of dispatchers that resign, or to the 22% of police recruits that resign. So our good stewardship requires prioritization. And this year, to reward all employees for their work done during COVID and throughout the time in serving citizens, the mayor proposed $15.8 million in raises. Of that $15.8 million, again, all general employees, non-represented, ASME, IMAW, and IUOE received 2% increases. Fire received 3%, dispatchers received 4%, and police received 5%. And, you know, I really commend Mr. DeWitt. He is correct, and we did experience unparalleled cooperation. We had a smooth negotiations process, and during this process, the EDI office and team and different agents and different people from within the city government showed up. We had 6 negotiations, and Mr. DeWitt disagrees. We've had conversations and made it very clear to him that these things remained in play and were part of our deal. Increased summer training pay for reservists and National Guards, including the buildings, maintenance mechanics, craft assistants, and maintenance assistants as a part of the IBEW bargaining unit. The city agreed to longevity pay increases. We also agreed to shift differential increases. And after reviewing litigation and internal equity, the city revised its total economic package in accordance with impass ordinance 5639. And it reads, and I know that everyone has a copy, following the negotiation deadline, at least 7 days before the mayor proposes his budget, the mayor and his designee shall advise the employee organizations of the total economic package. That is what we are here for today. Mr. DeWitt would have you to believe that we're here based on a last best offer, but that is not the case. The ordinance does not require that. And so I've highlighted a few portions for you to view today, including the whereas portions that makes it clear. Whereas referendum ordinance included separate provisions set up by council for impasse and arbitration procedures. You can't take a seat at the table unless we are at impasse. So the idea that we have an agreement and we're not at impasse goes contrary to the entire ordinance. Also, the referendum 2766 does not alter the home rule charter. It prohibits the city council from interfering with the operation of city administration and the control of the mayor for requesting contracts. Also, it does not authorize the direct council to exercise legislative powers under the charter or to propose budgets for the city or to approve or amend any things. With the impasse ordinance, it has to work in tandem, not in contradiction to the city charter. And in the city charter, it's very clear the legislative and executive powers. Section 12 of the charter states that the operations and capital fund budgets of the city, together with all budgets, are required to be submitted and shall be prepared and submitted by the mayor with the assistance of directors. It will be presented to council, which shall approve or amend any and all said budgets prior to the adoption of the tax rate, as now provided. That means that contracting authority remains with the mayor, but budget approval remains with the city. Section 14 further states, all contracts requiring disbursement of funds shall be limited in an amount not excess and that providing the appropriate budget. When the mayor presented his budget, this request was in excess. So the total economic package was amended to match with the budget and with the powers vested in the mayor by the city charter. An ordinance 5639 cannot contradict or go counter to the rules of the charter. So just to give you a rundown, when each year you guys see a ton of directors come in, but prior to that process, they meet with the mayor and the financial team. Their dream budget may not be what makes it into the budget. And when the mayor's budget is presented, that's what their budget is. Similarly, we meet with our labor associations and we present an agreement that would be suitable. Once a determination is made with the mayor and his designee and the finance office, that can be amended just as it was this year. So it would be unfair, it would be inappropriate, it would be counter to the charter for the city of Memphis to require the EDI office and labor unions and to bound them by a budget that the mayor solely has the power. Furthermore, contracting power lies solely with the mayor. There is no contract with that. And furthermore, there is some case law. I have provided copies for you. MOUs are non-enforceable contracts in the state of Tennessee, so our last best offer does not carry the same weight as a contract. And Mr. DeWitt is aware, the city is aware. And even with the ruling that we are not bound by MOUs, the city operates in good faith each year and holds negotiations. We honor those negotiations as amended and included within the budget. So we are at impasse and you are the arbiter. And what council has to decide today is between the city's positions, which includes a 2% raise for all positions in FY23 and FY24 and a 0.5 increase in hazard pay, or IBEW's position, which includes a 4% raise in FY23 and FY24. And I also, again, can agree with him, we're not far apart. And what he alluded to is we're not far apart because this offer did not change a great deal. When we looked at internal equity, 2% was what was going to be provided to all citizens. And we did also increase in our initial offer hazard pay by 0.5%. That language was clearly confusing for some, so we clarified. It is not a 2% increase in hazard pay. It is simply a 0.5 increase. And something that was not mentioned is in the initial agreement that was submitted by IBEW that the city accepted, they did not include the wastewater treatment plant. So the city did not cut them out of 1.5%. To the contrary, in our last best offer that's in the packet that you received from Mr. DeWitt, as well as the materials, we included a 0.5 increase for all members of IBEW, whereas in the initial offer, IBEW sought to exclude its own membership. In the spirit of equity, we didn't want to make that same mistake. So we included each and every member of the IBEW community. In addition to that, the city has agreed to bonuses that will amount to $742,000 for their members. It would mean a bonus of $1,500 in FY23, $2,000 in FY23, $2,000 in FY24, and $1,500 in FY25. So again, we are asking council to agree that with our position, Crafts should not receive a higher salary than police, fire, and emergency dispatchers. They should not receive more funds than they should not receive a greater raise than the 857 employees of ASME, than the 150 employees of CWA, than the 72 employees of IMAW, or the 258 employees of IEOE, or countless non-represented employees. So we're heeding your call to make police, fire, and emergency dispatchers a priority. And we are being fair and maintaining a balanced budget as is required. Finally, the Crafts 4% raise will create inequities for general employees. And providing a 1% increase would cost for all general employees, including ASME, IUOE, IMAW, would cost $1.87 million. If we were to increase it by 2%, as they're asking, for all employees that are similarly situated, it will cost $3.74 million.
Thank you, Ms. Hyman. Council members, if you have any questions, I suggest that you get in the queue. And I will say this, Ms. Hyman, you didn't save any time for rebuttal, so the council members will probably still ask you a couple of questions. Any council member? Well, there we go. Let it begin. Hit the request to speak Okay, so first we have Councilman Jones, Vice Chairman Jones. The floor is yours, good sir. Well, take it back. Hold on, Councilman Jones. Mr. DeWitt, you have, I think, 5 minutes for rebuttal if you would like to. No rebuttal? No, thank you. All right, so get straight to the questions. Councilman Jones. The floor is yours, good sir. Can we get his mic on?
My questions, Ms. Hyman, begin with, I'll start with history of increases in bonuses on page 13 of your presentation.
Can you come here?
Is this just for this association?
Yes, this is specifically for IMAW. For IBEW.
Okay. Colleagues, as we go through this budget season, what would be helpful for me is for us to have, particularly in the time that I've been on the council, so from 2016 on, for every bargaining unit as well as all general employees, what the raises and increases have been. A lot of people, we have a lot of people that work for the city. I know that there are different responsibilities that police and fire have, but you let the trash pile up in this city, what's going to happen? And what I don't want us to continue doing is continue to create different classes and reward systems for employees. Now we do recognize that I do recognize and cognizant of the role that police and firemen play, but for us to continue down, before we make any type of decision, I think instead of looking at things in isolation, we look at things in totality. And what would be helpful for me is to see everybody's raise 2016, 2017, police, fire, IBEW, ask me, all of it. So do we have that handy right now?
We don't have it handy right now, but I can let you know that the non-represented and represented increases have almost been in tandem. I'd have to get to you on the police and fire because we've had some philanthropic dollars that were also included. But I do want to
I'd like to say just from the general fund.
That spreadsheet tonight.
Okay, yeah, that will be helpful for me, and that's going to drive my decision making with this. Particularly if we've seen some years, and I don't recall all of them can sort of tend to to blend in, and I may forget what happened one year versus the other, but I think that type of information is going to be, I don't want to perpetuate our sending a different message to different employees. We are in a different situation than we were a year ago. We're facing some inflationary pressures that we didn't face a year ago. One of the things that I always keep in mind when I'm dealing with city employees, particularly those who start a career here and who end a career here, these people don't have Social Security to depend upon. So these type of raises and increases are important to their well-being, not only as employees, but even when they